Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar today. The topic for this webinar is SolarResilient, a new tool for resilient solar plus storage design. We have some excellent guest speakers with us today, and we also have with us our host for this webinar, Seth Mullendore. Seth is a project director here at Clean Energy Group. Before I pass it over to all of them, though, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping notes. So on your screen, you should see a little webinar console that looks something like the one that popped up when you opened this webinar. If you'd like to minimize the webinar console, you can hit the little orange arrow button. That'll minimize it to the side of your screen. A couple other things to point out. The audio portion of the webinar console, you can select mic and speakers. That's the default setting for the webinar audio. You can also listen in via telephone if you'd prefer. If you select that option, it will give you a call-in number. All of our attendees are muted by default. A very important note, we ask that you please submit your questions as you think of them throughout the webinar by typing them into the question box on the webinar console and hitting send. We will be reading through your questions as they come in, and we will get to as many as time allows in our Q&A session after the webinar presentation. So type those questions in as you think of them. Don't wait until the very end. And a final note, this webinar is being recorded. We will email you a copy of the webinar recording probably sometime this afternoon, and you can also find this recording on our website at resilient-power.org, and along with our previous webinars from this project. So with that, I would like to pass it over to our host for this webinar, Seth Mullendore. Like I said, Seth is a project director here at Clean Energy Group, and he is going to introduce our topic.
Thank you so much, Sam, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. I'm just going to start off with a little brief background for those of you that aren't familiar with us at Clean Energy Group and the Resilient Power Project. Clean Energy Group is a national nonprofit that is active in pretty much all aspects of clean energy. We focus on innovation in finance, technology, and policy for a variety of clean energy technologies. We also have a sister organization called the Clean Energy States Alliance. This is a membership organization of groups that handle statewide clean energy programs, so a lot of state energy offices. The Resilient Power Project is a joint project with the Meridian Institute and is completely funded by foundations. You can see a number of the foundations that support us here. To give you a bit of background about Resilient Power Project itself, the project has been active for about 3 years now, and it focuses on increasing awareness and support for alternatives for resilient power. The technologies that we mainly embrace in the project are solar combined with energy storage as an alternative to things like backup diesel generators. We focus on resiliency not just for backup power, but also for the economic resiliency benefits that solar and storage can provide to communities in many cases. The project is focused on bringing the technologies to low-income and otherwise disadvantaged communities with really two focus areas. One is affordable housing. The other is critical community facilities, whether that's an emergency shelter, a healthcare facility, first responders, anything that strengthens the community in an emergency. We work at all levels on this project, some on the federal level, but more often at state with policies and programs that can encourage the development of solar and storage for low-income communities. And we also deal on the local and the project level to actually get projects researched and studied and deployed. That's our ultimate goal, is to get more of these systems deployed in communities. As part of that, we do have a small technical assistance fund that can help with people with deferring some of the initial feasibility, technical and financial feasibility studies for projects. You can learn more about our work at resilient-power.org. We do a lot of webinars like this one today. We also put out a number of reports looking at the economics and just kind of the background of solar and storage technology. We do monthly and weekly newsletters, and it's all available on our website, which you see here. We also have a blog, and you can join us on social media as well. So with that, I would like to introduce our speakers today that are going to tell you about this great new tool that has been developed through through some Department of Energy funding. So first up, we're going to have Jessica Teese. Jessica is the Distributed Energy Coordinator for San Francisco Department of the Environment. In this role, she works to facilitate the use of distributed energy resources in support of the city's goal to achieve 100% renewables by 2030. Jessica previously was a program manager implementing the California's low-income weatherization program for large multifamilies, providing energy efficiency upgrades, solar, thermal, and PV to multifamily buildings in disadvantaged communities. We also have with us today Russ Carr, who is an associate with the engineering firm Arup. Russ is a chartered electrical engineer with 12 years of experience specializing in the policy planning, entitlement, and procurement of renewable energy, microgrids, and energy storage systems as integral elements to urban infrastructure. He has worked extensively with the City of San Francisco, with the utility Pacific Gas and Electric, the San Francisco Public Utility Commission, and the state of California. As an accomplished project manager, he's led multidiscipline design teams on large, complex, and fast-paced critical facility projects. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Jessica. I'll be back at the end to moderate your questions, which please do enter as you have them along the way.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us as we walk through our Solar+Storage sizing tool with you. So before we jump into the actual demo, I just want to provide a real quick overview of our Solar+Storage resiliency project, and then I'll hand it over to Russ for the live demo. I know that some of you who are frequent attendee of the webinars last March, we also gave another, the part one, if you will, of this project, a webinar here, develop a citywide Solar+Storage disaster plan. So if you would like more information about the overall project, in the email follow-up that we'll send later this afternoon, we'll have a link there if you would like more information about the project. And of course, you're also feel free to reach out to me as well. Next slide, please. Great. So this project is funded by the U.S. Department of Energy's SunShot Initiative. It's through the Solar Market Pathways program, and it's really to advance solar deployment across the U.S. So our project specifically analyzes the potential for Solar+Storage for resiliency. So in other words, planning a backup power system in the event of the next large-scale grid outage. So as you may or may not know, San Francisco's anticipated disaster is a major earthquake, and we're also surrounded by seawater, and therefore we're planning for sea level rise and other effects of climate change. So this project really creates that nexus, that intersection between the city's climate and resiliency goals. So with our project, we looked at the technical feasibility, policy considerations, and also, most importantly, how to fund such projects. So with the grant funding, we're working with many partners, such as technical consultants, such as Arup, leading the consultants' technical feasibility, and then as well as many other internal city departments, such as first responders, public health, emergency management, and really working together as a group to look for the best applications for such installations, from sizing the systems for maximum benefits to sizing the cost of different ownership and financing. As I mentioned, so in addition to analyzing the feasibility within San Francisco, our hopes for this project is that it will create the foundation necessary to serve as a national model for other cities and counties to do the same. So to really, for others to start thinking about and planning energy use as it relates to resiliency. That way, next slide, please. Great. So this is a 3-year project. It ends at the end of this year. In addition to the tool we are demoing today, we'll also have other resources available by early fall to the end of this year. Right now, we are in the process of publishing a roadmap that describes our process, what worked, what didn't, challenges, obstacles, and how we overcome them. In addition to that, we also have a best practices manual based on our experience. This is a truncated version of the roadmap so that if you're a city or county and you just want to to have a quick overview. You don't have to read through a roadmap. You can just get all the best practices and tips and whatnot on a shorter read. So in addition to this, as I mentioned, we also have planning tools and other educational resources, one of which we're going to demo today, the SolarResilient.org sizing tool. So once again, if you have any questions after this webinar, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll respond. So with that, I'll turn it over to Russ, who will be giving our demo today.
Okay, good morning or good afternoon, people, depending on where you are. So today I'm going to spend probably 20 to 25 minutes just demoing the features that the SolarResilient.org tool is that we've developed for the San Francisco project. And I'm going to demo all of the features and all of the items that the tool can do, so you can see how to do this in a live demo format. As Seth said earlier, if you've got any questions, enter them in the box and we will answer them at the end. Also, as we're demoing the tool, I'd like you to just think about, is there anything missing from the tool that would make it more suitable for your application? So as Jessica mentioned, this project runs until the end of this year, so December 31, and we have a small allocation of funding left to do any tool improvements over these next few months. So if there's something that you think would be really useful for the tool to do, and it doesn't do it at the moment, and that feature isn't too onerous to add, we can look at adding that feature to the final version of the tool. So a few things about the tool. First off, it's 100% free to use. This tool was developed with DOE funding. So this tool, no one has got any IP on this. It's free for the public to use. The tool in its current format works in every single state in the US. We have a little bit of funding to make this a worldwide tool that we're currently implementing. But at the moment, this will work in any of the 50 US states. And what this tool does, so this tool is primarily sized for resilience. So we think of any disaster that could happen to a building, this tool will allow us to size the solar and battery storage to provide power to that building when the grid isn't there. So this tool is designed to be used by architects, city planners, consultants, people who have portfolio of buildings, city departments such as the Department of Emergency Management, anyone who has a basic understanding of PV. So it's not a tool that experts can use, it's very simple to use. So if you can use NREL's PV watts, then you can use this tool. That was our kind of benchmark, because we want it to be widely available for people to use. The website is called SolarResilient.org, but SolarResilient.com will also get you to the same place. And when you enter the website, you'll see the homepage as you see now. So we ask people to create a login to the tool, and we ask people to do that for one simple reason. So the tool will save all of the buildings that you enter on the web. So you don't have to download spreadsheets, you don't have to download the individual buildings, you don't have to write stuff down. Everything is saved on the tool. So on my profile now, if I click the properties, you can see there's a whole long list of properties that I've assessed and I have saved in the tool. All we ask for is an email address to register. There's no address, no credit cards, just a pure email address is all you need to register. So once you're on the tool, the first thing we expect people to do is land at the homepage. So you'll see that it's sponsored by the DOE. You've got the SF environment logo here. You click those, it takes you to their websites. And our logo is at the bottom saying that we helped develop this tool. So what we expect people to do as they get to the tool is click the information button. So rather than write a manual, which pretty much nobody ever reads or has the time to read, we've condensed the things you need to know about this tool into 4 tabs. So the first tab, very simply, explains why we've developed this tool and how we think this tool will be used. So the tool is for building owners and managers to size PV and storage for a specific grid outage that they're designing for. So that's why the tool is been made. The next tab is the Assumptions tab. So this tab tells you all of the assumptions that are baked into the tool in their default options. The majority of these assumptions a user can change because they might have their roof might not be facing south, so they might want to orient the PV east, west, or any combination of that. But this is the standard. If you're doing a quick assessment, these are the default values. It then talks about the rooftop and parking lot density that we assume for PV. It tells you the type of batteries that this tool has baked into it. A user can also enter their own battery. It then talks about for each battery how we assume that the state of charge will be, what's the efficiency of the battery, what's the charge and discharge capacity of that typical type of battery. We then talk about in a default mode, the tool assumes that the energy storage device will be used for either demand charge mitigation or frequency regulation. And there we have a table about all the battery properties. The next tab is the Calculations tab. So this tab talks about every calculation the tool does and a quick blurb about how the tool does that calculation. So I'm not actually going to explain these calculations now because I'm going to show you them in a live demo. But as a new user, if you spend 5 or 10 minutes reading this tab, you will pretty much be familiar with all of the calculations that the tool can do. So I'm just going to scroll down here quickly so you can see that the information is contained here. And the final tab we have is just to acknowledge that this was made possible by the DOE. We state the DOE awards number and the standard DOE disclaimer. So by reading that information tab, you pretty much have all the information you need to be able to use this tool. So now I've logged in with my account, I've read the information, so I kind of understand how to use this tool. I'm going to show you a live demo, and we'll go through all of the calculation modes. So the first thing I'm going to do is click to create a new property. So we need to enter some basic property information. The first thing is we enter a property name. And the reason we do this is so the tool can store it. So I'm currently based in the Arup office in downtown San Francisco, so I'm going to base this demo on our office building. So I'm going to call it Arup Office Test. So this is in San Francisco, California, and the zip code where I'm at is 94105. You don't really need to put the city and the state in for the tool. That's just to save it. What the tool really needs is the zip code. And why we need that zip code is the zip code is based to allow us to understand the solar capacity in the particular area. So when I enter the San Francisco zip code, it's going to look at a TMY, so a weather file for San Francisco. So I get the right amount of solar resource in the location I am at. So very important that the zip code is correct for the city that you're looking to do a project in. The next thing I need to enter is what is my available roof area. And the reason the tool asks you to do this is because it's looking to see where we can fit PV on the building. So if you read the instructions of the tool, it gives you an estimation. It says if you don't know how much of your roof is suitable for PV, do a quick measure in Google Earth or some other measuring software and get the total square footage of the building, then assume 40 to 60% of that roof is typically good for PV. So this allows space for shading, firefighters access, and any kind of HVAC or mechanical equipment on the site. The other method you could do is open Google Earth, like I've done here, and actually measure out on the roof where is suitable for PV, avoiding HVAC, allowing for the firefighters access. This just takes a little longer. So if you want a quick estimation, I measure the roof and then say half of the roof is good for PV. If this is a more detailed project, I'd measure the roof as I've done here, put the blue tiles in where the PV can go, then allow space for shading or no shading, give it a kind of east to west PV orientation, and then I would put it in the tool. So it depends on how much time you want to go into this. So in this building I'm in now, we've got about a 6,000 square foot roof, so I'm going to put 3,000 square feet. The next thing the tool asks you is how much unshaded parking lot area have I got for PV? Now this could be 0 if you're in a building with no parking. What the tool does, it always prioritizes the roof as the first available area to put PV on because it's a higher density of PV. And then secondly, it will look to the parking lot. So I would again measure the parking lot, ensure that you allow an area for cars to move. So you don't want to be blocking exits that you can see where my cursor is. You don't want it in the shaded area of the building where you can see where my cursor is. So this particular building, just the center would be suitable for PV, for car parking PV. And then in Google Earth or other software, again, you just measure that area. So I'm going to say the building I'm in now has, let's say 5,000 square feet of available room in the parking lot for PV. It could be 0. It's quite often 0 in San Francisco as there's not a lot of surface lot parking. A lot of the parking is underground, not so good for PV. A few more things we need to enter here before we press calculate. The first one is how long do we want to be off-grid for? So this is a resiliency tool. So we're assuming that maybe an earthquake happens, maybe there's been a hurricane and it's blown power lines down, and how long do we think the utility will take to be restored? So there's been a lot of work done by PG&E, which is the local utility in San Francisco, about how long it would take to restore power after a major earthquake. And PG&E have produced data for this, and they think within 3 days, around 60% of the city has their power restored, and after 7 days, 99 or 97% of the city has power restored. So I'm going to say we're planning for an earthquake, and we're pretty optimistic, so we're hoping that power is going to be restored in 3 days. So I leave this cursor at the default level. The final thing we need to enter is what is the building load, so what is the power consumption of the building that I'm designing this disaster for. So there are 3 ways to do this. There's a quick, a standard, and a detailed. I'm first going to demo the quick way of doing it. I'll then demo the other ways later. And what this quick way does is a building owner just has to look at their utility bill, and typically that utility bill will tell you the peak monthly load on that building. So I'm going to say the building I'm in now has a peak load of 90 kilowatts. So the tool has baked into it a generic profile for an office building. And by entering this number, this kilowatt number in here, that profile is scaled to the demand of your building. The second thing I enter is what climate zone I'm in. So I'm in San Francisco, so I'm going to click in the San Francisco climate zone. And what this does is, again, so that it's scaled, we're scaling for power of your building. The second thing it scales for is where in the country are you located. So it scales it based on your climate zone. So after you've entered that, you just need to decide how much of your building, normal building load, do you want to provide for emergency use. So we've been working with San Francisco for 2.5 years now. We've surveyed a lot of buildings in the city to find out how much is their emergency power demand compared to what is their typical demands. And it can range, quite a lot. So if we look at a school is typically used in a disaster case as a shelter. And in a shelter, the city might use the gymnasium, it might use the auditorium, and it might use a cafeteria to feed people, and 3 or 4 classrooms to process people as they come in to do administrative work. So we found that about 10% of their normal load is their emergency load. And that's the same for an office building if you're using a few conference rooms to shelter people. At the other end of the scale are libraries. So libraries in emergency mode actually have slightly more foot traffic than in normal mode. So they actually use 100% of their normal load in emergency mode. The reason it's not higher is we slightly dim the lighting in emergency mode because we want to save that battery. So this slider here that we can adjust between 0 and 100%, calculates how much of your load that we want to use. So I'm actually going to say we're in an office building, so I'm going to allow 10% of my load as the emergency load. And what this will do now is this is going to produce a graph of the load that we're assuming. Let me scroll down to that. Okay. So this graph you see on the screen now is the actual electricity load that I'm designing for in an emergency. So you can do a quick sense check here. So I look at the graph. It says my maximum load is 9 kilowatts. So my peak load is 90 kilowatts. Emergency load is 10%. So 10% of 90 is 9. So that checks out. So you can see how your load varies throughout the season in this particular case. So now the tool has sized the solar and storage for this particular building. And what we can see is the tool is saying, for my particular office building with a 9% peak load, so 10% of my normal load, I need a 19 kilowatt PV array to provide my emergency power. And that PV array is going to take up 43% of my roof space and 0% of my parking space. It's going to generate for me 30,000 kilowatt hours a year. The battery that I need is a 16 kilowatt battery, 64 kilowatt hours. So that's a 4 kilowatt battery. And then what we can look at is how the system is going to perform in terms of a graph. So you can see on this graph, the blue line is the emergency load profile. So it peaks in the day when people are charging cell phones, listening to the radio, contacting loved ones, and it goes down at night when we assume that most of the lights are turned off and people are sleeping. The yellow lines are the solar irradiance for that day and the solar energy. The teal line is the battery. So you can see on day one, the battery has the capacity, then we discharge it pretty heavily during the night. Obviously, there's no sun during the night, so it's all battery power. Then the day after, the solar resource isn't great, so it charges a bit, discharges again, and then it repeats. So what the tool does, it kind of sizes that optimum balance between what is the available solar capacity and what is the size of the battery. The final thing to see is the system duration probability. So there are two ways that the tool sizes how big the solar and storage would be. The first one is what we call a typical arrangement. And this typical arrangement is the tool looks at all of the potential solar power throughout the year, so 8,760 hours, and it does that with the load also, the electrical load. Then the tool finds the average value over the year of that load and the average value of the sunlight. What we say then is depending on the outage duration. So I've asked for a 3-day grid outage here. And in the typical case, we always want the tool to solve for a minimum of 50%. So what we're saying is we want at least a 50% chance that the size of the solar and storage that I'm providing will guarantee that I can operate the loads that I want for 3 days. Now this is what's called the typical assessment, which is fine for a shelter. You know, if we've got a shelter and the disaster happens to happen on a cloudy day, or it happens to happen when it's raining, or it happens to happen in the middle of winter, you know, we're less likely to meet that 50%. We're likely to not have the power we need. So this is fine for a shelter where we're just providing people with some lighting, we're just providing people with cell phone charging. But it's not great if I'm a, say, medical center or I'm a dialysis center where people need that power to get their dialysis machine to work. So what the tool has, another option, is what's called the worst case assessment. So this assessment looks at all of the solar radiation throughout the year, and it picks the worst portion of the year. So it's effectively going to pick December 21, or somewhere around that time when it's not very sunny, and the daylight hours are a lot shorter. And it picks the highest period of load. So this is if you've got a really critical building, this is the button you want to press. So you can see instantly that the tool has gone from saying, I need a 19 kilowatt solar array to I now need a 46 kilowatt array. So it's over doubled. You can see I've gone from having 43% of my roof covered to I now have 100% of my roof covered and 2% of my parking lot covered. So in reality, you would kind of ignore that 2% of parking. You wouldn't install such a small array, and you would just do 100% of your roof. But I'm now getting 71,000 kilowatt hours from this system rather than the 30,000. Again, the battery's gone up. It was a 16 kilowatt 4-hour battery. Now it's a 24 kilowatt 4-hour battery. So again, the battery's gone up. But you'll see the system duration probability, we're pretty much guaranteeing that we can provide that power for that building. What the tool does is it looks for the 95th percentile. So we strip out the days of 100% darkness, and we strip out the days of massive load, and we go for the 95th percentile. So we want at least a 95% chance that the tool will provide all of the power that I need for that building, which what you can see is if the tool can do it for 3 days, it can pretty much do it forever without having to upsize the system. So that's the typical and the worst case calculations. And once you've done these, if you want more solar or less solar, you can just simply up these tabs very easily. So I can say I want 4 days off grid, and I want, let's go like 15% power. And if I click recalculate, once you've got all the data in for the building, you can just click recalculate, and in like 6 or 7 seconds, it spits out a new answer. So you can very quickly play around with the footprint you've got for the roof, and maximize that for resilience, or minimize it for sizing of battery and to what money you've got. So very, very quickly you can play around and get different answers. So I'm going to show you some of the advanced features we've got in the tool now under the advanced options. So the first thing is, what if I already have a PV array? So this building is asking for, this resilience case is asking for 30 kilowatts basically of PV. But what happens if I've already got, say, 25 kilowatts of PV? So the two things the tool can do. First, it can calculate the incremental solar you need over what's already there. But as we only need 4 kilowatts, in this case, of incremental PV, if I'm a building owner, I'm not going to go to installing conduits and inverters for 4 kilowatts. So I'm going to click on this Don't Add Additional PV button. So what this is going to do is it's going to effectively upsize the battery. It allows people who have PV to not add any more PV and just add storage to that PV array. And again, it will calculate for that for a resilient scenario. So now we're seeing we're adding 0% PV, we've got 25 kilowatts. So now it's, rather than being 96 kilowatt hour battery, because I need more battery capacity, because I'm putting less solar into the system, it's upsized the battery. So again, lets you simply play around with, do I want to add more PV, do I want to add PV and storage, or just storage? So really quick to do that. The other thing a building may have a diesel generator. So I can click, yes, I have a diesel generator. So the average load here is around 6 kilowatts. So I'm going to say I've got a small, let's say a 4 kilowatt diesel generator that can run for 24 hours. So I need to just size the gallons of the tank here. So I'm going to put a 15-gallon tank, which is around 24 hours to run a generator at this capacity. So now if I click calculate, what's going to happen is the tool knows that I've got 24 hours of diesel generator storage, but I want 4 days of grid outage. So what the tool is going to do is going to run the generator at a lower capacity, but it's going to run the generator for more time. So it's going to run the generator for 4 days and always have some guaranteed power rather than running the generator for just 1 day and then having no power for the other days. So if we look at the kind of graph of the system, so the black line is the generator output. You can see that we've stretched that generator output to 4 days. And when the solar is peaking, so in the day, we actually switch the generator off to save that fuel because we've got a lot of solar irradiation. So we're optimizing how that diesel generator works. So I'm going to take the generator back off now. Another thing that a use case that you might have, so we assume in a standard mode, you're going to use a lithium-ion battery and you're going to do some kind of demand charge mitigation. So that's great in California and states where we pay demand charges, and there's a business case for lithium-ion to do demand charge mitigation. What the tool assumes here is on that first day of the outage, if we've got demand charge mitigation ticked, it assumes, to be conservative, that the outage has happened after the demand charge mitigation event. So the battery has discharged between 4 and 7 p.m. It's done its job. It's saving us money on the demand charge. It's making a business case. But then, obviously, the battery doesn't have all of its energy to provide services for resilience. So if you don't want demand charge mitigation, first of all, you could change the battery technology to a different type, such as lead acid. If the battery is just going to sit there for a long time, it would be a cheaper battery to install. But you can just click on the resilience only. So if you click resilience only, what you do when you click this is at the point of the outage, it assumes your battery is 100% charged. So it allows you to install a smaller battery. So it allows you to install a battery that's just for resilience and doesn't have any reserve capacity for other items. So it just allows you to reduce the size of your battery. And then the final thing that you can see in the advanced tabs are all of the items that we've got for PV. So we could have premium modules. The PV could be tilted at 20 degrees, 2 degrees. It could be facing east. We can change the PV system losses. This is especially useful if you've got an existing PV system that's a little bit older and doesn't have the full capacity. And again, you can change the inverter efficiency. Again, very useful if you've got an existing system. So what I'm going to do now is show you some of the advanced tabs. So I'm going to turn off that we've got additional PV, and I'm going to turn off that we need a generator, and I'm going to put it back on to demand charge mitigation mode. So the other tabs are how we deal with the energy. So the first one is very quick. Once you know the information, it takes 2 or 3 minutes, and you can spit out answers in the tool. The next one is if you've got some more information. So if you can get access to your utility data, either in 15-minute increments or 60-minute increments in a CSV file, you can upload that CSV file to your particular building. So let me download. And we've got a template in the tool, so I'm just going to download that. Let's let it download. So I just clicked out of the tools. I'm just going to go back. Because I've saved the property, I've clicked out of it, but I can just go back into the property and it's all saved. You don't have to re-enter anything. So I'm going to just download this example. There we go. And I'm going to choose it. So I've got this saved in downloads. Let me look for the Excel file. Sorry about this. There we go. So now I'm just going to upload that Excel file. So what this is going to do is you'll now see the emergency graph is the actual demand of your particular building. So now we're peaking at 45 kilowatts. So I'm going to run this and see. I'm going to say we still want 15% of the building's load, which is 45 kilowatts. This is a large building that I've entered now. So I'm going to click calculate. And what I would expect to see here is that's way too much load for the small roof and small parking lot I've got. So I'm expecting this test to fail. So I just want to show you the failure mode. And what's going to happen is when it calculates, we should see some red bars. Oops, sorry, I didn't change the outputs. So we're going to see some red bars in a sec. Okay. So this building has a roof area of 3,000 square feet. It has a 5,000 square feet parking lot. So we've got 8,000 square feet of possible place where we can put solar. But 8,000 square feet of solar is not going to get you enough solar to provide power for this load. Now, this load usually is around, averages at 30 kilowatts, peaks at 45, so this is a big load. So what the tool says now is, you see some red boxes. So the tool is saying I need 140 kilowatts of PV, and the tool is saying that takes up 100% of my roof space and 204% of my parking lot area. So we don't have enough room to install the PV we need. So the tool tells you can do a few things. First off, you can reduce the number of days that you want to be off-grid to reduce that energy capacity. The second, you can reduce the load, emergency load that we're looking to provide. Or thirdly, you can add more area to the roof or parking lot. So I can't increase the roof of this building, it's fixed. I still want to be off-grid for 3 or 4 days. So my option is really to reduce the power. So I'm saying 15% here, so I'm going to trim this down to 9%, and we'll try to recalculate that and see how close that gets us. So again, just trim it down, you press recalculate, and it will spit the answer out. Usually takes around 5 or 6 seconds. I'm on Wi-Fi in my office today, so it takes a few seconds longer. Here we go with the results. So now the tool is saying that for 9% of my load, rather than peaking at 45 kilowatts, I'm now peaking around 27 kilowatts. So I've significantly reduced my load. I'm still providing the nearly 10% of power, and what it says now, I need an 87 kilowatt solar array, which takes up all of my roof and 82% of my parking array, and I need an 88 kilowatt, 350 kilowatt hour battery. Now, so these aren't huge PV arrays, they're not huge batteries. These are in the realm of a typical commercial building. And now I can see I've got a little bit of my parking lot left. So what I would do is I would up my load to maybe 10 or 11%, fill my parking lot, and that would be my resilience case. So the final thing I'm going to show you, and is what we've been doing most with San Francisco, is the detailed tab for how to install, how to build up your loads. So what we've been doing in San Francisco, the buildings that we've been looking at are used very differently in an emergency to how they're used normally. So a school might have 100 classrooms, 1,000 kids, very different electrical load to how it operates in an emergency. So in a regular school, there's nobody there at night, a lot of people there in the day. In emergency mode, there might just be 200 people sheltering in the gymnasium, eating in a cafeteria, getting processed in a classroom. So the load is very different. So what we've done is we've gone round to the city of San Francisco, typically someone from emergency management, Jessica from SSE, and also maybe a facilities person, and we've understood which rooms will be used in an emergency. And then we look at those rooms and we do a quick count of how many light fixtures are in that room, how many people would charge their cell phones, and then we build up a load profile, load by load. So we would click to add a row. We would identify what type of load that is. These are all populated in the tool. If you don't see it, you can add your own. So we might want to say we want to add some LED lighting. The tool populates the power of that lighting, a typical assumption. The user then just needs to enter how many of these light fixtures do we have in this particular room, and how often will this particular fixture be operated. So this, once you've visited the building, this takes about 15 minutes to enter. So I'm going to show you one that we've done earlier so you can get an idea of what that looks like. And this is a school called Thurgood Marshall in the Bayview area of San Francisco. So I'm going to click on that preloaded school I have, and you'll see that the emergency electrical load now has a long list of loads that are in the particular rooms that are going to be used as a shelter. So we have some wheelchair charging, we have some Wi-Fi, a lot of lighting, we have some plug loads such as coffee makers, laptops, PCs, and some radios, and a lot of cell phone charging. So that is how that building is going to be used in emergency. like the other options, we click calculate, the tool calculates. So one thing we stayed away for in this project, and we kind of wrestled with it at the start, is economics. So we all agreed it would be awesome to have economics built into this tool. We also had the hard challenge of this tool has to be applicable to every single US state. And with a modest budget, there was no way of entering every utility bill data for all of the kind of utility rates in the country and keeping all that up to date with the change, how often they change. So we stayed away from economics in this tool. So how we think this tool is going to be used is if someone's going to do a few analysis, they're going to get maybe 3 or 4 options for their building or portfolio of buildings of what are the typical solar and storage sizes. There's then an export to PDF button. So we would imagine the people will press this button, and what this does is it provides a nice, neat one-pager of what the system is. So it tells you the address, it tells you the roof area, it tells you the battery size, the load, and it tells you the PV system size and how the system operates. So we expect that people would then have this particular one-page PDF and send it to a local installer, so maybe a Tesla, a SolarCity, a STEM, whoever that vendor is. And then that vendor will do a site assessment for that particular building and do an economic assessment. So what we really see the tool as doing is it gets you to the stage where you can go and talk to vendors. So you're basically bypassing the early feasibility and concept stage and being able to go straight to a vendor. So it really speeds up what you can do. You don't have to hire anyone. You can do this all in-house. So that's the major features of the tool explained. I'll now pass back to Seth, and we can answer any questions.
Thanks so much, Russ. And we do have a number of questions. I'm not sure if we're going to get to them all in the time we have. I think we have a little bit of extra time to go over as we get into this. So to start things off, there was a question about the peak load that is entered in kilowatts. There was a question about why that's kilowatts and not kilowatt hours. Maybe you can go into an explanation and the thought behind that.
Yeah, the reason that is kilowatts is that we have a default load profile in the tool, and we need that kilowatt value to scale that default load profile to your particular building. And also, most people's bills, not every utility do this, but most people will display your maximum demand that you've used in a month in a kilowatt. It finds out your maximum hourly demand. So that's why we've used that particular number. If you can't find that number on your bill, another way to do this would just be to divide out the number of kilowatt hours you've used in a day or a month by a day or a month to get you that kilowatt number. So just dividing the hours out. That could be a workaround to that.
Yep. Okay, great. I wonder if you could pull up that the data that you entered for the when you had the hourly load. Just there were some questions on just what that data actually looked like.
Yeah. So also I didn't mention, if you go on the tool, you'll see that these tool tips that tell you what this tab is about. So if I look at the standard here, this should tell us. It tells you this is the hourly emergency profile, and the template says, and on here it says how that has to be looked. So what the tool is looking for is a CSV format, and all it is an hourly cell. So it's just either 8760 data if it's hourly, or 35,040 cells to be filled in if it's non-hourly. And what it looks like is just a simple kilowatt number just in one column for all of the time. So it's either 8760 or the 35,000 figures that should be filled in this column. So a single column.
Okay, great. So you don't need an individual timestamp for each of those. It just assumes that those are those increments then.
Yeah, and that's what the tooltip tells you here. It's just we start at midnight on January the 1st, and then just go down in hours.
And I may be stating the obvious, but we also want to make sure that your CVS file does not have any other information on it, whether it be dates or any other of your other data.
Yeah, which is why we included that example.
Yeah.
So someone can just click download the example and see exactly what the file should look like. The tool will give you an error if it's not in the correct format.
Great. Great. So somebody, I think probably from Canada, wants to know if you're going to be developing this for Canadian municipalities as well.
Yes. Yeah, so one of the actions that we've got is to make, so PV Watts, anywhere where PV Watts can work, this tool is going to be able to work in the next, probably kind of 6 weeks. So PV Watts is the National Renewable Energy Laboratories, or NREL's, the tool that they have for sizing solar. So this particular tool we have calls their tool to size the solar effectively. So anywhere where that system can work, which is, I'm pretty sure it's Canada, then our tool will be able to use. So yes, we expect to have a more global tool in the next 6 weeks.
Oh, that's fantastic. I didn't know that. So that's great to hear. And one specific question came in asking about cloud cover in Florida. Maybe you can explain just where how that PV data works and how it works for regionally, and I guess also how the climate zone plays into the calculation as well.
Yeah, so let me tackle the climate zone first. So the climate zone is only relevant in the quick estimation for power. And what this is doing is just all the climate zone is used for is to scale the default energy profile that we have in the tool to a different climate zone. So, the electrical profile in California is different to Nebraska, is different to, it's different to somewhere else. So it's just scaling that standard profile we have to another region in the country. So that's what that does. The second question on how we calculate the PV energy. So we use NREL's PV Watts tool to do that. So if you just Google PV Watts, that will come up. So P and V, and then Watts, so WATTS, the tool will come up. And what that does is by entering our zip code, we then are picking a weather file, typically from an airport in that city. So if we looked at Orlando, Florida, and put a zip code for Orlando, Florida in, what the NREL's website will do is we'll select the weather file from Florida's airport, maybe Orlando International Airport, and then what that does is it basically has the solar irradiance for all of the year in that weather file, and then PV Watts calculates that solar irradiance, the size of our solar array, and then gives us a kilowatt hours. So it's not going to get down to the granularity of a quick cloud coming over, but it does get you to how a typical state or a typical city's weather will react. So it is location specific to wherever you put your zip code in.
Great. Couple of questions about load profile. One, the default profile that you had there was kind of an up and down, where it's more during the day and then it's less at night. Just a question about the design. What if you had a flat profile, say something like a fire station or a hospital that's running more at full capacity throughout the day and night, and how that plays into the design considerations?
Yeah, so the default standard profile is a kind of office building. So it's exactly as you say, a building that is used more in the day than in the night. So not representative of a hospital or a fire load. So for them type of buildings, we don't expect people are going to use the quick mode very often. So that's why we didn't go through every single building type and enter the profile for every building type. It would have been a little bit onerous. So that's why we were expecting people to use either the standard or the detailed tab more often. But if you don't have that data available, then the tool won't exactly calculate the load you have. So what I would do in that case is also the standard tab that we have, where we have this load profile. You could just use that as a benchmark and just change the value so it's a more flat profile. So we don't have a default flat profile in the quick assessment. You would need to do the standard one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And are there representative load profiles? I think NREL might have developed some representative load profiles for other types of buildings, but I'm not sure where those are available. Are you familiar with those at all?
I am, and that's what we've used. That's what the office building is based on. We worked with NREL to how to scale this per the area of the country you're in. So if a lot of people on the call are thinking this is something they really want, maybe give Jessica or I some feedback, and we can add it to our list of tool improvements. Okay,
great. There was a question about the case study, the Thurgood Marshall that you showed. Is that publicly available, or is there any way that people could access that to take a look at it?
Yes. As Jessica was explaining at the start of the project, that we're producing a best practices manual and also a roadmap for San Francisco. They have case studies in them of how the stuff is sized, all the process we went through, and they're going to be publicly available pretty soon. So people will have multiple case studies to look at how we could do this. Okay, great. A question about the economic side. Somebody was wondering about any free tools that they could perform the financial analysis. They specifically mentioned there's a software company out of California called Jelly that has a tool where you can do demand charge management analysis, and then a free trial of Homer while that's available. Do you know of any other softwares out there that could do the financial side of the analysis? Yeah, so NREL in the process of making their REOPT tool, so that is spelled REOPT. That is going to become publicly available in the next few months. And what this does is we'll give you an economic case for solar and storage. So that's not published yet. It's in beta mode, but that's going to be out very soon for people to use. But then that, Jelly, and Homer would be the kind of three that I would go to. Great. Yeah, I'm excited about the NREL tool coming out. That should be great. A couple of things people want to know if it's possible that the software could add. One, I'm just going to go through these and you can answer. One is, could natural gas generators be added? Could you extend it so it's more than a 7-day outage? And would it be possible for the software to be able to suggest an optimal type of storage based on other parameters that were entered? Yeah, so natural gas, we don't have any plans to add this. The whole point, the whole point for the San Francisco project was to get rid of any kind of fossil generation. So we don't have any plans to add natural gas. I can talk to our internal team to see how long that would take to add. It might not be a huge deal. So what were the other questions again? If you can extend to more than 7 days, and if there's a way that the software could suggest the optimal type of storage based on other parameters entered. Yeah, so the extending it is probably an easy thing we could do. Suggesting storage is definitely beyond the scope of this. That's a pretty detailed and pretty complex calculation. We want to keep this tool as easy and as user-friendly as possible. I think it would take too much work to make the tool be able to select the type of storage you have based on your application. Okay. And just on that, I think we're just going to do one more question here, and then we're going to sign off. I'll hand it back over to Sam. On the different types of storage, maybe you can just, again, go through the types that are available and how that might affect the sizing of the battery system. Yeah, so the types we have lithium-ion, advanced lead acid, we have flow batteries, and we have the kind of saltwater batteries. And how these will affect the sizing, we have different charge and discharge rates, so their ability to throw the kilowatt hours out of the battery. They have different round-trip efficiencies, and they also have different kind of levels that you can discharge to. So if we go on the information tab, And if I go to the assumptions, there's a table at the bottom which kind of quickly summarizes all of the kind of factors for each of the battery. So you can see what those defaults are.
Great. And then I see that you can also enter your own system. I assume you can enter these parameters that you're showing here would be what would change on that?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for answering all these questions. And if anybody has any remaining questions, please do reach out to Russ and Jessica with those, or you can reach out to us if you have lost their email, and we'll make sure it gets directed to the right person. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you again to Russ and Jessica. That was really great. And I'm going to turn it over to Sam for any last thoughts.
Thanks, Seth, and thank you, Russ and Jessica, for your great presentations. If you would like to find more information about Clean Energy Group's Resilient Power Project, we have a lot of information and resources on our website. You can check us out at resilient-power.org, and we're also on Facebook and Twitter. We have a lot of great resources, newsletters, papers, and we will have upcoming webinars. So stay in touch, and we hope to see you at the next one. Thanks, everybody.